Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis, 44b of Meseches Kiddushin, and we are at the very bottom of the page, 2 lines from the bottom. The last word on the line, it says Masiv Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna posed a question. So the Gemara was discussing a machlokes, a dispute between Shmuel and Rav as well, and versus Ula. So the case that the Gemara was discussing was what happens if a man goes over to a ketana, to a child, a girl, and offers her Kiddushin, and she accepts it. So does that concern us at all? Do we consider that Kiddushin? Is it not Kiddushin? So Shmuel and Rav agreed to this opinion. Shmuel said that we require actually that the man give her a get, that he give her a document of divorce, and that she also do miyun. Miyun is when a child gets older, they express that they reject the marriage, so we would also require her to reject the marriage outright. So the Gemara explained the reason why we need to do both of these things. Number one, she needs a get, because even though the man gave her Kiddushin, and she as a katana cannot really accept Kiddushin, certainly not on a Torah level. There's no marriage here. She shouldn't need a get. But maybe her father approved of it. And if the father approved of it, then the Kiddushin would work and she would need a get. And yet we still require that she do miyun, that she express her refusal, because if the father didn't approve of it, that means they were never married. On the other hand, he gave a get, so it looks like they were married, when they really weren't. Now, why does that concern us, that it looks like they were married when they really weren't? Because what happens now if this girl's sister receives Kiddushin from the same man? So if he was married to the first girl, so then Kiddushin would not take effect on the second girl, on the sister. But if he was never married to this first girl, then Kiddushin would take effect on the sister. Now, he gave a get to the first girl. It looks like he was married to her. People will think that Kiddushin does not take effect on the second sister, when really it's possible that it does, because maybe they were not married. So that's why we also require that the first sister, the young girl, do miyun. She expressed a rejection. Why does she need to do that? She has a get already. But what we're really saying by doing that is, it's possible the get wasn't necessary. It's possible they were never married, and at least on a Torah level. And therefore, when he tries to marry the sister, we will be concerned that it takes effect. And she indicates that they were never married by doing miyun, by expressing rejection, by saying, at most we had a rabbinic marriage here, d'Rabbanan, on which miyun, the expression of a rejection, would work. And so that's why we require, according to Shmuel, both a get and miyun. Ula disagrees. Ula says, you don't need anything. We're not concerned about this at all. She's a child, it can't take effect. We're not concerned apparently that the father would come and approve of it. And therefore, Ula says that when a man gives Kiddushin to a girl, to a minor, you don't need a get and you don't need miyun, you don't need anything. So now the Gemara poses a question on that opinion of Ula. The Gemara says, Masiv Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna asked a contradiction to this from the following brisa. It says, Ein mochra lekrovim. So the Mishnah, or the brisa there, is discussing who is a father allowed to sell his daughter to, right? So earlier in the Masechta we discussed the idea of an Amma Ivriya, a Jewish maidservant, that the father can sell his daughter when she's a minor to a family, and she works for them, and then eventually she's supposed to marry the master or the master's son. So, who is the father allowed to sell her to? So the Mishnah said, Ein mochra lekrovim. He's not allowed to sell her to a relative. Why? Because, meaning to a relative that she's forbidden to marry. Because the idea is that she becomes their maidservant, but then that she marries them eventually. And if it's a karov, if it's a relative to which she's forbidden to marry, so then that's not the idea there, and so it doesn't work. The father's not allowed to sell her to a relative that she wouldn't be able to marry. Rabbi Lazar Mishum Rabbi Lazar Amru Mochra Lekrovim. But in the name of Rabbi Lazar, they said that you can. He's not concerned about that. It doesn't have to lead to a marriage, and therefore the father can sell this daughter to a relative, even though that relative cannot marry her. Vishavin, the top of the next page, the Gemara says, Vishavin, they both agree. Both the Tanakama, the first opinion, and Rabbi Lazar agree, Shemochra almana lekohen gadol, grusha v'chalutza lekohen hadiot. That you would be allowed to sell his daughter in the case that she was a widow. She could be sold to the kohen gadol. Or if she was a divorcee, a grusha, or a chalutza, someone who received chalitza instead of yibum, in the case of a levirate marriage, she got a chalitza, lekohen hadiot, he'd be allowed to sell his daughter, who was a grusha or a chalutza, a divorcee, to a regular kohen. So what's this all about? So it is forbidden for a regular kohen to marry a grusha, a woman who's divorced, or a woman who got chalitza. He is allowed to marry an almana, a widow, but he's not allowed to marry a grusha, a divorcee. A kohen gadol can't even marry an almana, a widow. However, even though these are forbidden marriages, if they would give Kiddushin, it would work. So if a Kohen Gadol gave Kiddushin to an almana, to a widow, so then it's forbidden for him to marry her, but the Kiddushin works. And the same and so they're married, it's just forbidden. The same for a regular Kohen, to a grusha, to a divorcee. If you would try to marry her, it would work. It's forbidden, but it would work. As opposed to the cases of forbidden relatives, if forbidden relatives, krovim, that are forbidden by Torah law, it's what we call really chayav krisos, those which are your chayav kares for. So those, Kiddushin doesn't even take effect. There's no Kiddushin. So therefore what the Mishnah is saying is that even the Tanakama, the first opinion that said that he can't sell his daughter to a relative, that's because it's not even shayach, it's not even possible for them to be married. And a Alma Ivriya has to be possible to lead to a marriage. And there it's not possible to lead to a marriage. However, an Almana, a widow to a Kohen Gadol, or a Grusha, a divorcee to a regular Kohen, it's possible for that to lead to a marriage. It would be a forbidden marriage, but Kiddushin would take effect. Therefore, the father is allowed to sell his daughter as a Amma. It works for him to sell her as a maidservant to such a person, to the Kohen Gadol, or to a regular Kohen. Now, the Gemara examines this case. The Gemara says, Hai Almana Hechidami. What is this case that the father is selling his daughter to a Kohen Gadol, and this daughter is a widow? A widow means she was married before. So how did she become married that she became a widow, and now the father is trying to sell her to a Kohen Gadol? So Hechidami, what's the case? Ilema de Kadsha Aviha. If the case was that the father accepted Kiddushin, that's how she got married the first time. The father accepted Kiddushin. Her husband died. She's now an almana. She's a widow. And now the father wants to sell her as a maidservant. Mi matzi masbimla. Ask the Gemara, is the father even allowed to sell her in that case? There's a halacha, there's a rule that a father cannot sell his daughter after Ishus. Once she's been married once, he's not able to sell her. So the Gemara is saying the case of Almana LeKohen Gadol cannot be where the father married her off the first time. Because once he marries her off, he's not allowed to sell her after that. So what is this case where she was married, she became a widow? The case can't be that the father married her, because if he married her off, he can't sell her after that. So what is the case? Elolav de Kaddish ihi nafsha. The case must be that she accepted Kiddushin on her own. Vikakari la'amana, yeah, it's calling her an almana, and it's saying she's a full-fledged widow. She accepted Kiddushin on her own, and she's married, apparently. So how could that be? It must be that it's possible for there to be a marriage there. And this is a question on Ula. Ula said that if a girl, a minor, accepts Kiddushin on her own, don't worry about it. Nothing happens. You don't have to, it's nothing. You don't need get, you don't need miyam. But here we see, the Gemara is asking Ula, we see no. The case must be where she accepted Kiddushin. The father, I guess, approved it, but she accepted the Kiddushin. And that we would view, apparently, not as the father marrying her up, but as she married herself off. And therefore, when she now becomes an almana, she becomes a widow, the father is able to sell her as an amma, as a maidservant. That must be the case, and it's a question on Ula. We see that a girl, it's possible for her to become married by accepting her own Kiddushin. So the Gemara answers, Amr of Amram, Amr of Yitzchak, Rav Amram saying the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, Hacha b'kiddushay yiyud. Now here we're talking about a Kiddushin of yiyud. How did she get married? Through yiyud. What's yiyud? Yiyud is where she was sold as a maidservant, and then the father, or the master, or his son married her. So the Gemara says that's the case that we're talking about. How did she become an almana? The case is where she was sold as an amma, as a maidservant, and the father didn't accept Kiddushin for her. She got sold as a maidservant, and then the master married her, and she accepted Kiddushin in some form. V'aliba de Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. But this would have to be going according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, de Amar, who says, Mos harishonos lavul Kiddushin nitnu. That the original payment for the maidservant is not Kiddushin. In other words, there is a machlokas. When a father sells his daughter as a maidservant, and then she ends up marrying the master. So there is an opinion that says that how does that marriage work? Where's the Kiddushin? The Kiddushin is the money that he paid for her. If it's the money that he paid for her, that means the father who received the money accepted the Kiddushin. And if the father accepted the Kiddushin, that means he married her off. If he married her off, then now when she becomes widowed, he's not allowed to sell her, because that's the rule. The rule is that if the father married her off once, he can't sell her after that. So the Gemara says we're not going in that opinion. We're not going in the opinion that the money that the master pays to the father is the Kiddushin money. No, that's just payment for the Amma Ivriya, for a maidservant. And now the master he has her as a maidservant, and then he's meyayid her, then he marries her, but not using that money of Kiddushin. He does his own form of Kiddushin with her. So she does, he basically lets her off of some work or something, and that's the acceptance of the Kiddushin. That's how it works. So that's what Ula is going to say the case is here. You know how you can have a case of an almana who's then being sold? How was she married in the first place and the father's allowed to sell her now? The case would be that the father sold her as an Amma Ivriya, but that wasn't Kiddushin. We're going in the opinion that money that he receives is not Kiddushin. He's not marrying her off. He's just selling her as an Amma Ivriya. Then the master married her, and she accepted the Kiddushin. And then the master died. She's now an almana. She's a widow. So she goes back to her father's domain, and now the father is allowed to sell her again. So the Mishnah says that if he sells her to a Kohen Gadol, even though she's not allowed to marry the Kohen Gadol, but it would work since it's possible for them to become married if the Kohen Gadol would give her Kiddushin be'isr, in a prohibited way, it would work. So therefore, the original sale, the father is able to sell it to that Kohen Gadol as an Amma Ivriya. Okay. Continuing from the two dots, the Gemara says, Itmar. It was said, Meis v'naflo lifnei achiv v'liyibum. Let's say you have a girl who receives Kiddushin, and meaning a man gave a minor Kiddushin, and before he gave her a get or anything, he died. So now she may have been married to him, right? That's the concern, at least according to Rav and Shmuel. So she may have been married to this man, and now he died, no children, so she falls to Yibum. So Amar Rav Huna Marav, Rav Huna said the name of Rav, Mima'enes lema'amaro, ve'eno mima'enes lezikaso. She would have to do miyun if the yavam, the brother who's able to perform the levirate marriage, which we're not going to do though in this case, we're not going to allow her to go through that, but he has to, just like Rav and Shmuel said that the original man who gave Kiddushin to this girl would have had to give her a get and miyun, so now she fell to Yibum. So the brother would have to do miyun if he did Maimer. Maimer, you may remember, is Kiddushin, rabbinic Kiddushin in the context of Yibum. So she falls to Yibum, and if that brother does a Maimer, if he gives her Kiddushin, then we're going to require her to do miyun. However, ve'eno mima'enes lezikaso. But if he does not give her Kiddushin, doesn't do a Maimer, she does not have to do miyun, she doesn't have to do a refusal. Just for the Zika. The Zika is that connection, that bond that she has of being required to do either Yibum or Chalitza, so he doesn't have to do miyun just for that. The Gemara explains, Ketzad. So how does this play out? Asaba Maimer. Let's say the brother did Maimer. In other words, again, the case is a man goes over to a young girl, a minor, and gives her Kiddushin and she accepts it. And then the man dies. So before he has a chance to give her a get. So now she falls to Yibum, to the brother. So, and the case we're now talking about is where the brother says, oh, Yibum to this nice girl, and he goes and he does a rabbinic Kiddushin, what we call Maimer, and he gives her Kiddushin. So, on that we say, Tzricha get, Utricha chalitza, Utricha miyun. We now require that brother to give her a get, to give her chalitza, and that she do miyun, that she do a refusal, so a rejection. So we now need three things. Why do we need all these things? Tzricha get, so she needs a get from this brother. Shema nisratza b'kiddushay sheni. Maybe the father approved of this kiddushin. In other words, let's say, one case of this could be that the father never approved of the first brother's kiddushin. So that was not a kiddushin. But now the second brother went and gave her a Maimer, gave her a kiddushin. Let's say the father approves of that. So now they would be married. Not even as a Yibum. They'd be married because in this case, she never was married to the first brother. If the father would not have approved of the first brother's kiddushin, but he would approve of the second brother's kiddushin, he does approve of the second brother's kiddushin, she's married to the second brother. So she needs a get from the second brother. Tzricha chalitza, but she also needs chalitza. Shema nisratza b'kiddushay rishon. Maybe the father did approve of the first brother's kiddushin. If that's the case, she was married to the first brother. Then that brother died. That means there's a legitimate yibum here. So to get out of that zika, that bond, she needs chalitza. So that brother is going to have to do chalitza on her. And finally, tzricha miyun. She also needs to do miyun. She has to give a rejection. Why? Shema lo nisratza v'lo b'kiddushay rishon v'lo b'kiddushay sheni. Because maybe the father did not approve of any of the kiddushins. Not the kiddushay rishon, the kiddushin of the first brother, and not the kiddushin of the second brother. But yet the second brother gave a get. So it looks like she was married to the second brother. And in that case, people will think that her sister, just like we talked about earlier, if people think that she was married to this man and then this man tries to marry her sister, people will say, oh, it doesn't take effect because he was married to the first sister, when really he wasn't because the father never approved of any of the marriages. So therefore, we require that she also do a miyun, she do a rejection, as if to say none of this was, there was no legitimate marriage here. There was only at most a rabbinic marriage, that's why I'm doing miyun. And therefore, she was never married to this man. And if he would try to marry her sister, we have to be concerned that that would take effect. Right? people will say that Kiddushin doesn't take effect on her sister when really it's possible that it does. Because it's possible that she was never married to this first brother. But if lo asa b'maimer, if he did not do maimer, so again, the case is a man goes over to a girl, gives her Kiddushin to a minor, gives her Kiddushin, and then he dies before he can give her a get. She falls to Yibum. If that Yavam, if that brother does not give Maimer, he doesn't give her a Kiddushin, so then, Eina Tricha El Chalitza Bilvad. All she needs is Chalitza. That's it. Why? So, because she doesn't need a get from this guy. He never gave her Kiddushin. Right? If she was married to the first guy, does that mean she falls to Yibum and she just needs Chalitza? If she wasn't married to the first guy, then she doesn't fall to Yibum, but she doesn't need a get from the second guy because he never gave her Kiddushin. And why would she need a get? So all she needs is Chalitza. Now, Maya Amar Tibai Nami Miyun. But you'll say why? She should also need to do Miyun. She should have to give a rejection. Because Shema Yomer ain't Kiddushin Tovsim Ba'achosa. Because people might think that Kiddushin won't take effect on her sister, and really it could. In other words, let's say as follows. She got Kiddushin from the first man. What if her father never approved of it? That means she was never married to the first man. Which means that there was never a legitimate Yibum here. She was never Zakuk to the brother. Because she was never married to the first brother. So she was never had a bond to the second brother. If she never had a bond to the second brother, so you might say that meaning if she had a bond to the second brother, so then he's not allowed to marry her sister. But if she never had a bond to the second brother, he is allowed to marry her sister. So if he tries to marry her, though, people will think that since he did Chalitza, that it doesn't take effect because he did Chalitza, he was connected to the first sister, so Kiddushin must not take effect on the second sister. So we should make the first sister do Miyun, do a rejection to show, no, we never really had a bond here. It was at most rabbinic. And Kiddushin could take effect on my sister. Why don't we require her to do Miyun in this case? So the Gemara says, it's simple. Because everybody knows, Achos Chalutza Dirabanan, that the prohibition to marry the sister of a Chalutza, of a woman that you do Chalitza on, is only Dirabanan. And Kiddushin, everybody knows it will take effect. In other words, in this case, so she fell to Yibum, he did Chalitza. So he's not allowed to marry, even if it was a real marriage, it's true he's not allowed to marry her sister, because he did Chalitza to her, to the first sister. He can't marry the second sister once he had a connection to the first sister. But that's only rabbinic. Midoraisa, he actually is allowed to marry her, the sister, which means that Kiddushin does take effect. So nobody will say, oh, if he did Chalitza to the first sister, must be that Kiddushin doesn't take effect on the second sister. No, everybody knows Kiddushin would take, even though he did Chalitza on the first sister, Midoraisa, by Torah law, Kiddushin does take effect on the second sister. So we're not concerned that people will think that Kiddushin doesn't take effect on the second sister, and therefore we don't need the first sister to do Miyun. D'amar Reish Lakish, as Reish Lakish says, Kan Shana Rebbe taught the following, Achos Gerusha Midoraisa, the sister of your divorced wife is forbidden to you Midoraisa on a Torah level, and therefore if a man divorces his wife, he cannot marry his wife's sister on a Torah level, and Kiddushin won't even take effect if he tries. However, Achos Chalutza Midivrei Sofrim, but the sister of your Chalutza is only D'Rabbanan that you can't marry her, in which case Kiddushin does take effect. So if a man has a woman fall to his husband's wife, his brother's wife. A man's brother dies, his brother's wife falls to Yibum, he now does Chalitza to that woman, so he's not allowed to marry her sister, even after he does Chalitza, but that's only rabbinic, and therefore, since it's only rabbinic, if he would try to marry her, it would take effect. Kiddushin would take effect, he's just forbidden to do it. But the Kiddushin would take effect, and everybody knows that, so therefore, we are not concerned here. If he does Chalitza, we're not concerned people will think that Kiddushin won't take effect if he tries to marry his sister, because people know that Midoraisa Kiddushin does take effect. Okay. The Gemara continues, says, Hano beitrei dahavu kashasu chamra tuseit sifi bebavel. There were two guys and they were drinking wine under some kind of tree in Bavel, in Babylonia. Shakal chad minayo kasa de chamra. One of them took a cup of wine, yav le'lechavre, and he gave it to his friend. Amar, and he said, Mikacholi bartech livri. Let's be Makadesh, your daughter, to my son. So, a man can give Kiddushin to a girl's father for himself. But here he's trying to be Makadesh, his son. So he's giving, in this case, he's using wine as Kiddushin. He's giving wine to his friend and saying, accept Kiddushin, that your daughter should now be Mikudeshes, betrothed to my son. Amar Ravina says, even according to the opinion of Shmuel, who said that when the man is giving Kiddushin to a young girl on his own, we're concerned that maybe her father approves, and therefore we require a get. Right? If a man goes over to a minor, gives Kiddushin, Shmuel says he has to give her a get, because maybe her father approves of this, and they're married, so she needs a get. So even if you say that, says Ravina, but, top of the next page, Shema nisratza haben lo amrinan. But we are not concerned that the son might approve of it. In other words, over here, you can't just do Kiddushin on behalf of someone else, of another man. So even if it's your son. So here the father is giving Kiddushin to this girl, basically it's the girl's father, and that's fine, that works. But he's giving it for his son. So you say, oh, but maybe the son approves of it. So Ravina says, no, nobody says that. We don't say maybe the son approves of it, and that we should be concerned for it. The Gemara says, Amrele Rabbanan Ravina. The Rabbanan said to Ravina, Vidilma Shliach Shavya. We should be concerned if we see that happen, that maybe the son appointing his father as his Shliach to bring the Kiddushin. We should be concerned that that there's really a Kiddushin that went down here. So the Gemara says, no. Lo chatzif inish l'shavya lavu Shliach. A son isn't so chutzpahdik, isn't so brazen as to appoint his father as his Shliach for his Kiddushin. We're not concerned that is what transpired here. The Gemara says, Vidilma artsuye artse kameh. But maybe in general you shouldn't assume that you don't have to be concerned that the son approved of his father's choice for him. But maybe the son already expressed that he wants to marry this girl. He said, there's this girl, I really want to marry her. And the father said, okay. And he went and he did it on his behalf. Maybe there we should be concerned that the son would approve. So maybe we should be concerned that there's a real Kiddushin here. Amarli Rabba Bar Shimi. So Rabba Bar Shimi said, Beferish Amar Mar de lo savar laha de Rabbu Shmuel. So the answer is you're right. That would be a concern, but really Ravina said explicitly that he's not concerned about the concern of Rav and Shmuel. Meaning, Rav and Shmuel were concerned in the previous sugya that when a man goes over to a girl, gives her Kiddushin, we're concerned maybe the father approves of that. So that was the concern that Rav and Shmuel had. So the Gemara is saying, Rabba Bar Shimi says that Ravina did not have that concern. He was never concerned. Basically, it sounds like he holds like Ula. We're not concerned that maybe the father approved. And if we're not concerned that the father approved in that case, so all the more so, we're not going to be concerned that maybe the son appointed the father a shliach, or maybe the son approved of the Kiddushin in this case. We're not concerned for all these possibilities, and therefore that's why Ravina is saying over here that there's no Kiddushin. When a father goes over to another father and tries to marry his son to that guy's daughter, we're not concerned that there would be a Kiddushin here. We don't have all these Shema, but maybe this, maybe that. That's the opinion of Ravina. Now Rashi has to explain, even though Ravina said, even according to the opinion of Rav and Shmuel, he said, so it's not true in the end. The Gemara is saying, no, it's because he doesn't hold like Rav and Shmuel. So Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says that that Ravina said that just to get his point across, but it wasn't that really true. So it's a kind of a hard thing to deal with, but that's what Rashi says, that Ravina said, even according to the opinion of Shmuel, he would agree over here. The Gemara says, has a question on that, but isn't it possible that the son does approve? And so the Gemara ends up in a place that really actually, in order for Ravina to assume that we're not concerned of all these possibilities, is because really he doesn't agree to Rav and Shmuel in the first place. We're not concerned in that case, in the original case, where a man goes over to a girl, gives her Kiddushin, we're not concerned that the father might approve. And in this case, where one father gives Kiddushin to another father, Ravina says we're not concerned that the son might approve of his father's actions of giving Kiddushin on his behalf. Okay, I hope that you were able to stay with me. That was a pretty intricate Gemara. Look forward to picking up from here next week.